Have you ever wondered why some people seem to drain your energy no matter how much you try to help them? Why your kindness sometimes leads to resentment rather than gratitude? The reason might be deeper than you think, rooted in what psychologist Carl Jung called the shadow self. Today, I'm going to reveal something that might challenge everything you believe about helping others. There are actually 7 specific types of people that you should never help. At least, not in the way you might think. This isn't about being selfish or turning your back on those in need. It's about understanding a profound psychological truth that Jung discovered. Sometimes what looks like help actually prevents growth and creates harmful dependency. I've spent years studying Jung's work and witnessing these patterns play out in real relationships. The insights I'm about to share have transformed how I approach helping others, and they might just save you years of frustration, resentment, and wasted energy. So, in this talk, I'll walk you through each of these 7 types, explain exactly why traditional help backfires with them, and most importantly, show you what to do instead. Because the truth is, there's a much more powerful way to truly serve these people that honors both their journey and yours. These insights aren't just theoretical. They come from observing how these Jungian principles play out in real relationships and real lives. What we're exploring today comes from both deep psychological understanding and practical observation of human behavior. Let's dive in. Number 1, the eternal victim. The first type of person you must never help, at least not in the conventional way, is what I call the eternal victim. You know this person. Their life is an endless series of crises and unfair circumstances. Nothing is ever their fault. The world is constantly happening to them. In Jungian terms, this person has completely disowned their power and projected it onto external forces. Jung believed we all have a shadow, parts of ourselves we reject and refuse to acknowledge. For the eternal victim, their shadow contains their personal power, responsibility, and agency. They've pushed these qualities so far into their unconscious that they genuinely cannot see their role in creating their circumstances. When you encounter the eternal victim, your natural instinct is to rush in and rescue them. You want to solve their problems, give them money, or fight their battles. But here's what happens when you do. You actually reinforce their victim identity. You become another character in their story, the temporary savior who will eventually disappoint them or be replaced. So what should you do instead? With the eternal victim, true help means holding space for their discomfort while reflecting back their power. It means saying, "I believe you're capable of solving this," instead of, "Let me solve this for you." It means asking powerful questions that invite self-reflection. What part of this situation can you control? Or, what's one small step you could take? This approach is much harder than simply fixing their problem. It requires tremendous restraint and compassion. The eternal victim will often resist fiercely because you're asking them to integrate parts of themselves they've rejected. But this is the only path to real transformation. Remember, Jung taught that wholeness comes from integrating our shadow qualities, not from having others compensate for them. When you refuse to play rescuer to the eternal victim, you're actually inviting them towards psychological wholeness. Number 2, the shadow projector. The second type is what I call the shadow projector, someone who consistently blames others for qualities they refuse to see in themselves. Jung was fascinated by projection. He observed that the traits we most strongly react to in others are often the very qualities we've rejected in ourselves and pushed into our shadow. The shadow projector has mastered this defense mechanism to an extreme degree. They're quick to point out everyone else's selfishness, dishonesty, or manipulation, while remaining completely blind to these same tendencies in themselves. They're constantly seeking help with problems caused by other people's deficiencies. When you try to help a shadow projector by validating their perspective and solving their people problems, you become an unwitting accomplice in their psychological splitting. You help them maintain the illusion that the problem is out there rather than within. The shadow projector might be a business leader who goes through assistance at an alarming rate. They hire people, quickly become dissatisfied with their incompetence, and fire them. When seeking help, their question is always, how can I find good people who actually know how to work? The breakthrough comes when, instead of improving their hiring process, they're asked to consider what qualities in these employees trigger them the most. Through this exploration, shadow projectors can recognize they're projecting their own perfectionism and fear of inadequacy onto their staff. The incompetence they can't tolerate in others actually reflects their own deeply buried insecurities. So how do you truly help a shadow projector? You gently turn their attention inward. When they complain about someone else's behavior, you might ask, does that quality exist in you in any way? Or what might this person be reflecting back to you? This isn't about blaming them, but inviting them to consider the psychological mirror that others provide. This approach requires tremendous skill and care. The shadow projector will often respond with anger or defensive denial. After all, projection serves as a psychological protection. But true help means guiding them toward integration of these disowned parts, not colluding with their external focus. As Jung said, everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. When you refuse to engage with the shadow projector's outward blame and instead invite self-reflection, you're offering them the chance for profound growth. Number 3, the psychological vampire. The third type is what I call the psychological vampire, a person who consistently drains energy without reciprocating or replenishing. Jung understood that relationships involve exchanges of psychological energy, or what he called libido. In healthy connections, this energy flows back and forth, with both people giving and receiving. The psychological vampire, however, has developed a pattern of one-way energy flow. They come to you with needs that are never quite satisfied. They take your time, attention, emotional labor, and advice, but somehow never reach a point of self-sufficiency. After interactions with them, you feel mysteriously depleted, while they seem temporarily energized. From a Jungian perspective, these individuals haven't developed their own connection to the collective unconscious, the deeper source of psychic energy and renewal. Instead, they've learned to tap into others as their energy source. The psychological vampire turns every conversation into a therapy session, with endless problems to process and emotions to manage. Their friends offer support, solutions, and encouragement, only to have the vampire call the next day with a fresh crisis, seemingly having forgotten the previous conversation. When you try to help a psychological vampire through continued giving, you're actually preventing them from developing their own inner resources. Your constant availability becomes a crutch that keeps them from finding their own source of energy and wisdom. So, what's the alternative? With the psychological vampire, true help means establishing healthy, energetic boundaries. It means recognizing that your depletion doesn't serve either of you in the long run. Practically, this looks like limiting your availability, setting time boundaries on conversations, and redirecting them to other resources. More importantly, it means helping them identify their own internal sources of renewal. You might ask, what activities make you feel energized? Or, where could you find support beyond our relationship? The goal is to help them develop diverse connections, rather than depending solely on you. This approach often triggers anxiety in both parties. The vampire fears abandonment, while you may struggle with guilt. But as Jung taught, individuation requires developing one's own relationship with the deeper sources of psychic energy. By refusing to be their sole energy source, you're inviting them toward greater wholeness. Number 4, the responsibility shifter. The fourth type to be careful with is the responsibility shifter, someone who subtly transfers ownership of their problems to you. Unlike the eternal victim who openly positions themselves as helpless, the responsibility shifter initially appears to be seeking guidance or collaboration. But watch carefully, and you'll notice a pattern. By the end of the interaction, you've somehow become responsible for solving their problem, making their decision, or managing their emotions. In Jungian psychology, this represents a failure to integrate the adult archetypal energy, what Jung might consider part of the mature self. The responsibility shifter remains in a childlike state, looking for parental figures to shoulder the burden of their life. Let me share an example. The responsibility shifter might be considering a career change. Initially, they ask for input on options, which seems reasonable. But as conversations continue, something strange happens. Their questions become increasingly specific, focusing on what others think they should do rather than exploring their own desires. When redirected to their own wisdom, they become frustrated. "But I need you to tell me what to do," they insist. "You're the expert." The underlying message is clear. If the decision doesn't work out, it will be on someone else, not them. When you help a responsibility shifter by taking ownership of their decisions or problems, you're actually impeding their psychological development. You're denying them the opportunity to develop confidence in their own judgment and the capacity to bear uncertainty. So what's the alternative? With the responsibility shifter, true help means consistently returning ownership to them. This looks like replacing answers with reflective questions. What do you think would work best? Or, how might you approach this decision? It means resisting the subtle pull to take the psychological burden from them. A powerful technique is to make the shifting pattern explicit. I've noticed that when we talk about your challenges, I end up feeling responsible for the solution. I wonder what's happening there. This brings the unconscious dynamic into conscious awareness, where it can be addressed. This approach requires fortitude, especially when the responsibility shifter responds with helplessness or anger. But as Jung understood, psychological growth requires confronting and integrating these underdeveloped parts of the psyche. By refusing to carry what isn't yours, you're actually inviting them toward greater wholeness. Number 5, the growth resistor. The fifth type is the growth resistor, someone who asks for help but subtly or overtly sabotages all solutions. You know this person. They come to you with problems, listen to your suggestions, and always have a reason why nothing will work. "I've tried that. That wouldn't work for me." Yes, but their commitment to remaining stuck is stronger than their desire for change. In Jungian terms, this represents a complex, a cluster of emotionally charged associations that operates autonomously in the psyche. The growth resistor has unconscious investments in their problems that are more powerful than their conscious desire for resolution. Perhaps their identity is built around a particular struggle. Perhaps their problem serves a hidden purpose, like keeping them from facing a deeper fear. Or perhaps, as Jung might suggest, they're avoiding the necessary suffering that comes with transformation. The growth resistor claims they want a romantic relationship, but has an objection to every potential partner or dating approach. After months of this pattern, it becomes clear that their stated desire for partnership is at odds with a deeper fear of intimacy and vulnerability. Their resistance is actually a protection against what they truly fear. When you try to help a growth resistor by continuing to offer new solutions or working harder than they are, you get pulled into their complex. You become another character in their internal drama, the latest person who failed to help them. This actually strengthens their resistance rather than dissolving it. So what's the alternative? With the growth resistor, true help means naming the pattern you observe without judgment or frustration. It means being curious about the resistance itself. I notice you have reasons why each suggestion won't work. I wonder what function this problem might be serving in your life, or what might be scary about solving this. This approach shifts the focus from the presenting problem to the resistance itself, which is where the real work lies. It brings conscious awareness to the unconscious forces that maintain the status quo. As Jung taught, transformation requires facing our complexes directly, not working around them. When you refuse to engage in the cycle of suggestion and rejection with the growth resistor, you're actually inviting them to examine the deeper patterns that keep them stuck. Number 6, the wisdom bypasser. The sixth type is the wisdom bypasser, someone who constantly seeks external guidance while ignoring their own inner knowing. This person collects advice, perspectives, and information endlessly. They might see numerous therapists, read hundreds of self-help books, or constantly poll their friends for opinions. Yet despite all this input, they never seem to develop trust in their own judgment or intuition. From a Jungian perspective, this represents a disconnection from what he called the self, the central organizing principle of the psyche that contains our deepest wisdom. Instead of looking inward to this source, the wisdom bypasser has externalized the authority for their life. The wisdom bypasser might consult 7 different career counselors about their professional path. They can recite various perspectives and recommendations in detail. But when asked what they themselves want, they look genuinely confused. "I don't know," they say. "That's why I'm asking the experts." When you help a wisdom bypasser by becoming yet another source of external guidance, you're actually reinforcing their disconnect from their own inner compass. You become part of the problem rather than the solution. With the wisdom bypasser, true help means consistently redirecting them to their own inner authority. This looks like turning their questions back to them. What does your intuition tell you? Or, if you already knew the answer, what would it be? It means valuing their internal wisdom above your own insights for them. This approach can be frustrating for the wisdom bypasser, who has become dependent on external guidance. They may insist they don't know or become anxious when pushed to trust themselves. But as Jung emphasized, individuation requires developing a relationship with one's own inner guidance system. By refusing to be another authority figure for the wisdom bypasser, you're actually helping them reconnect with their most essential resource, their own deep knowing. Number 7, the self-abandoner. The final type is perhaps the most subtle yet pervasive, the self-abandoner. This is the person who consistently sacrifices their own needs, boundaries, and well-being in relationships. Unlike the other types who take too much, the self-abandoner gives excessively. They're the chronic people-pleasers who can't say no, the parents who have no life outside their children, the partners who lose themselves entirely in relationships. From a Jungian perspective, these individuals haven't developed a strong enough ego structure, the healthy sense of self that allows us to exist as distinct individuals while in relationship with others. Their boundaries are permeable, and their sense of worth is externally derived. The self-abandoner is often exhausted and depressed. They spend their days responding to everyone else's needs, a demanding boss, adult children who still rely on them for daily support, friends who call at all hours with crises. When asked about their own desires, they genuinely don't know. "I just want everyone else to be happy," they say. When you try to help a self-abandoner by focusing solely on their presenting problems, exhaustion, anxiety, relationship issues, you miss the core issue, their fundamental pattern of self-abandonment. Worse, if you position yourself as their rescuer or problem solver, you recreate the very dynamic that keeps them stuck. With the self-abandoner, true help means supporting them in the uncomfortable process of reclaiming themselves. This looks like gently challenging their excessive giving. What would it be like to say no to that request? Or how might you include your own needs in this situation? It means celebrating their small acts of healthy selfhood rather than their sacrifices. This approach often triggers tremendous guilt and anxiety in the self-abandoner who has built their identity around being there for others. But as Jung understood, psychological health requires a balance between connecting with others and maintaining our distinct individuality. By refusing to reinforce their pattern of self-sacrifice and instead supporting their journey toward healthy selfhood, you're offering the self-abandoner their best chance at sustainable well-being. As we've explored these 7 types of people you should never help, at least not in the conventional way, a profound paradox emerges. Sometimes, the most loving thing you can do for someone is to not give them what they're asking for. Jung understood that psychological growth often requires confronting difficult truths and integrating disowned parts of ourselves. When we rush to rescue others from this necessary process, we may be serving our own need to feel helpful rather than truly serving their highest good. This doesn't mean abandoning people in need. It means helping them in a way that honors the wisdom of their own journey, even when that journey includes struggle and discomfort. So the next time you encounter an eternal victim, a shadow projector, a psychological vampire, a responsibility shifter, a growth resistor, a wisdom bypasser, or a self-abandoner, pause before jumping in to help. Ask yourself, what does this person truly need right now? Is it my solutions and rescue, or is it my belief in their capacity to grow? The most powerful thing you can offer is often not your advice or resources, but your unwavering faith in someone's ability to find their own way, integrate their shadows, and become whole. As Jung himself said, "The shoe that fits one person pinches another. There is no recipe for living that suits all cases." The true art of helping others lies not in providing universal solutions, but in supporting each person's unique path toward individuation, even when that support looks like stepping back rather than jumping in. Remember, sometimes not helping is the greatest help of all.